Welcome to Credit Shift, the podcast that dives into the challenges and opportunities, tools, strategies that are shaping the world of credit, digital collection and digital transformation. I'm Mark Opperman, co-host of today's podcast and co-founder at Webio. And today I'm joined by Graham Bragg, one of the very long-standing Webio employees. Graham, welcome.
Hi, Mark.
Graham
Hello, thank you.
is account director, and hopefully we're going to have a really interesting conversation in today's episode. We're really going to dive into what AI, what you need to know about AI and digital strategies in 2025 for debt collection. We're going to look at the actual where it works, share insights, understand how it's going to change in 2025. And then obviously, really, we always like to share some actionable takeaways. So, really looking forward to today's conversation. Today is based on a recent webinar that we did. So, we expand the conversation in the webinar and get into a bit more detail. So that's on webio.com and it's in our thought box. So that's all the preamble out of the way, Graham.
Yeah. I say, good to keep it short, Mark, because you know that we can talk forever. You know that, and probably not everyone wants to hear what we can say, but there are some interesting things here, hopefully. Yeah.
But if I was to sort of, throw it over to you, Graham, and just say, look, it's fair, probably comment. What's going to happen in 2025 is just really an extension of what worked in 24, probably quicker, faster, and in some instances cheaper and more effective. But, what are your takeaways and what are you seeing?
Yeah, I think you're right, really. I mean, the main thing for 2025 is learning from what happened and what improved in 2024. We can always guess where things are going to go, but things in this area for artificial intelligence and for the whole marketplace really moves so fast. So, to be realistic, I think you have to look at what was really good in 2024, what had leaps and bounds forward that are going to make a difference and possibly didn't quite get there last year. And to me, one of the biggest ones is going to be the way that the AI can now pick up sentiment analysis and alert the client and change the conversation live,
Yep.
as it happens, really. And that's really key because we all go into a conversation, like when we talk, Mark, we're always in a good mood when we start. We're not always at the end, right?
Oh, no.
It's how do you keep that so we're both in a good mood right to the end? And that's understanding how things change, what's been said, and what the sort of underlying issues within what's being said and how it's being said are. And really, until last year, it wasn't really possible to do that. We had things like understanding what was being said, the old standard NLP. They've said they want to make a payment. Great, put them in. They want to make a payment queue. But now it analyzes that deeper. It listens. It sees where that was within the conversation and says, "Hang on a minute. They say they want to make a payment, but based on those last two utterances and the way they've got a little bit more edgy, I think we need to look into this a bit further," and it will guide the conversation. I think that's one of the biggest things we're going to see this year. And what are your thoughts on that? I know you've sort of seen a lot of customers doing the same.
I'd agree. And actually, do you know what? It was a really interesting conversation I had with somebody there. It's only last week, and and we got into talking about AI, and I nearly, do you know what? The explainer to try to get it across to somebody was, look, let's forget about talking about AI for a moment. What is AI doing? And really, when you peel it back to say, what is AI going to do for conversations in this area? It's going to help automate more conversations. It's going to be able to understand what the customer wants. That means that actually they're going to get more personalized journeys. Those journeys are going to give a better customer experience. And ultimately, it's the customer wins and the business wins. So sometimes I think we get too caught up on the wonderful technology and, oh my God, it's going to do this and oh my God, it's going to do that. But like, if we were to boil it back to ultimately the job to be done is to give a really good customer experience, automate as much as the conversation as possible, and then the customer steps away at the end with a good outcome. And if that is what happens, that's a win-win for everybody, because if you look at the alternative, you're going to have to get emails, letters, agents involved. It's not going to be as quick. going to cost the company a lot more. They're not going to engage with their clients as much. So in every metric that you can think about, it's probably less than what an
Mhm.
AI driven digital journey would
Yep.
be. And
Yep.
it was interesting just that sort of trying to frame it to say, don't be caught up on the whole AI bubble. It's more what's the job it's doing, because
What's it
there's a
delivering?
lot of aspects
Yep.
of that.
Yeah, absolutely agree with you. I mean, this is, I think really interesting, and we could probably talk half an hour on this one. But I often visit my clients and ask them exactly the question, what are you seeing? And it's interesting to see the different layers of management, from the agent that's working the conversation through to the managing director of the business, what they see AI is delivering for them and what their benefits are, and they're all very
Yeah.
different. You've got, the productivity is up, the bang for the buck is greater than it was with X, Y, and Z. And
Yeah.
then you come way down the levels. It's so much easier to manage conversations. We're getting through more in a day. You keep going down the chain, and that sounds rude. I don't mean it in a rude way, but it's like, you sort of go back to the individual agent and you speak to them. And it's funny how that changes, because when we first engage, and I think anyone listening to this, if they're in the area and they've got a contact center, they're going to say the same sort of thing. These things scare the agents. Is my job going to
Oh,
disappear? Is AI going
yeah.
to take over my job? But actually, once it's been in for a couple of months, what we see is that the agents are really happy. And I've said it before on webinars and so forth, but I get jazz hands. People go, oh, it's really helped me do my job and do my job better.
Yeah.
And you ask questions, you ask why, and what it's doing, it's taking away the dreary, repetitive, boring pieces that they were doing
Yeah.
90% of the time. And now they're doing sort of 78% of their time is doing the really interesting parts of the
Yeah.
conversation, that where a human is needed, and AI may be secondary to that. And that's, going to be the case for a long time, if not forever. And it's interesting to see those different views. What's really working for you? And I love
The
the agent
agent,
piece, because when you boil that
that
down,
agent concern's a
you
real
know,
one, though, isn't it?
yeah,
That
it
for me,
absolutely is.
and look, let's be clear, we're never going to get rid of agents from collections activities. And it is funny, if I go back a few years, the headlines in the paper, agents will be gone by 2023. Then it was 2024. Now it'll be 2027 or 28 or 2030. It ain't going to happen, and that's the first thing.
That's it.
But
What jobs will
you know,
survive AI? We say it all the time, don't we? Absolutely.
but that is your typical um, overhype curve at the start. The expectation is set so high, and then gradually, year after year, that level of acceptance, that level of performance increases, and then all of a sudden, 3 years later, somebody goes, "Oh my God, it's an overnight success," and not really sort of factoring in that actually it had built up year after. Because if I go back to 2022, yeah, our and look, we manage millions of conversations every month for our clients. 99% of these are credit collections or payments. But back in 2022, it was roughly about 55%. 2023 jumped to a little over 72%. If I look at the last quarter of 2024, it was up over 85%. So now the acceleration is dipping ever so slightly, because obviously it's harder. But the one thing I think people are starting to understand is that capability is very powerful when used in the right way. Um, but I'd be interested, and I'm sure you've had this on numerous occasions. People overestimating the capabilities of AI,
Yeah.
thinking it's magic. It's going to do everything for them, and you're sort of going, "Oh right, let's walk you back from that
Yes. So true.
understanding." Yeah,
It's so true. I use AI, like probably most people listening to this use AI, and we use it for different things. I use it to help me write letters. I use it to find facts out about things, and it's often, and you should all try this. You go to something like Chat GPT and you say, one of the questions I ask quite often, I'm looking at speaking with somebody, want to know a bit about them, I haven't asked them yet, is what is XYZ's companies? How many agents do they have? What do they use for their call center system? And you type in as a second question once you've given the answer, is that 100% correct? He'll say, I'm not really sure. In fact, I think they might be using this and that and the other. And this is what we call the AI hallucination piece. And
Yeah,
that's where you've got to be really careful. And sort of going back to where we started on that sort of sentiment analysis, understanding NLP, the secret to that really is not using these large language models. It is using the way Webio works, which is these custom language models that are specifically written and trained for clients in the debt collection and
yeah,
finance market, because they're very different conversations. It's regulated. The sort of answers they're giving are specifically focused on that. So what you're not getting those hallucinations. You're not getting those, I think this is the best answer. What you're
yeah,
getting is, I've learned this over 5,000 conversations, 5 million conversations. 50% of them went this way, 50% went that way. And then when I follow them down the route, this one got a payment, but this one didn't. I'll start to look at those best ways
yeah.
of doing it and always guide the best way,
And
and
that's
that's key.
we're going to delve into that a bit more on our next podcast, where we're going to talk about the difference between large language models and customized language models, like we have Webby, where it's that collections focus. But Graham, if I was looking at the difference between 24 and 2025, a lot of people are talking. The two bits that jump out for me are conversational summary and what we're calling a co-pilot. But um, would you see that as probably the two that will have the biggest impact in 2025?
I think so. I think it's going to be different for different people, but overall, I think you've probably got it right there. One of the biggest issues, even when AI has been having a lot of the conversation, doing a lot of the heavy lifting, capturing certain details before the agent gets it, one of the biggest issues has been somebody actually having to read through that history and say, well, what's been said? How do I best attack that? By having AI give them that summary and give them an indication of what they should do next based on there was a vulnerability or there was a payment offer, but that changed into a promise, but that changed into
Yeah,
having that real quick summary enables agents to be more efficient. I mean, we love some statistics, and you talked about sort of 20 in 22, 50 odd, 56% ish, up to 24, 85% of automation. I think where that is really key for most people is I've got the stat here with conversations daily handled by an agent. And without AI, because we measure this quite heavily, we've got a benchmark from the clients we start to work with. An
yeah.
average agent was getting between 50 and 70 conversations a day. So that's what they
Now
were
that
getting
will be a
through. And
phone agent.
ultimately,
Would that be right? So an
that would be
agent on the
correct,
phone.
yes.
Gotcha,
Absolutely,
gotcha.
yep, yep.
Yeah,
But with automation, so moving this across to an asynchronous system, such as your SMS or your WhatsApps or your Vibers or whatever the conversation's being held over
web
an
chat,
electronic
whatever the
digital
case may be.
channel.
Yeah,
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 you've got it. Yeah, that automation went from 50 to 70 to 380 to 420. I'm reading these numbers here to make sure I get them right, because when I first read them, I thought 50 to 70 to 380 to 420. That seems just ridiculously high.
yeah.
But speaking to the clients, benchmarking with them, and working on it, that's pretty much where it is today.
But
And
that
that's at the
if
sort of
you're thinking, if you look at the numbers there, though, Graham, if the agent is doing 100% of the work, yeah, and they only do 50 to 70 with 85% automation, that would equate
15%
to
of the
that.
previous
So
work. Yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah. So um,
absolutely. Yeah,
one of the interesting things that I always am fascinated about is the agent feedback that on a digital conversation, because they're engaged end to end. Yes, it's not like a phone call where they have to be there every second, otherwise the person would hang up. So there's a level of comfort, um, both for the agent and for the customer at the end of the day. It's just that the willingness for people to share information on digital channels, once the conversational flow is designed well and it's a good experience, they share a lot. But the
ah,
agent
definitely.
experience is that they're happier doing it like that because they get to manage a call or manage a conversation end to end. Now, as we said already, they may only get involved where absolutely required. But again, they're getting they're getting more results on every day. So they're, as you quite rightly said earlier, they're not doing the
It's
the monotonous stuff day in day out of
yeah,
what's your account number, what's your postcode, what's your this, all of that sort of low hanging fruit and low
no, absolutely.
intensity work is taken away.
I got 1,000 stories from talking to the agents and talking to the teams at the companies we work with, where the customer's actually given feedback, why they engaged, why they actually got into a payment plan, why did you do that? We've been trying to get hold of you for the last 60 days, and all of a sudden, and it's amazing. And there are two sides to it, as you say. There's the agent's version of this, and then there's the customer's version of that. Both very positive, but the agents were always, oh, we'll do digital. I'd rather do digital than telephony, because people scream and shout on telephony. It's not so bad on digital. And then he got to, well, we're doing digital. What I prefer is I want to do the ones that come in. They're the inbound ones. I don't want to do the outbound ones when I've got to start the conversation. AI and all this automation gets rid of that, and so you're getting people
Yeah.
talking to you at the right time when they're ready to talk to you. So that's changed as well. So not people aren't bothered now. "Oh, I just want the inbound ones," because they're pretty much all ending up being inbound by the time they get them, which is a superb way of moving things
I
forward.
think
But
one
then
of the things that
sorry, go on.
it's worth noting though is that, like, there are, in the world that we live in credit and collections and these types of conversations, there's a high level of regulation. One of the big things that we've seen during all the way throughout 2024 is our vulnerability detection. So as the digital conversations are going back and forth, there's four classifications or categories of vulnerability. We're identifying them. What are the traits that that conversation is exhibiting? We're feeding that back to the business. A number of our clients immediately move that to a vulnerable team. Others, actually, depending on what type of vulnerability, it could be health, it could be one of the other ones. But again, depending on what it is, they would manage it accordingly. So it really does, from because that's one thing it's always an area of concern from compliance. Oh, how is the AI going to manage these different journeys? And that really, it's
It's
ultimately the
and it's
AI
just come up
is
even
just
bigger. Yep.
helping the compliance team identify these things. And then ultimately, it's the business to decide, how do we want to manage? I mentioned earlier about better personalized journeys. It just means that you're able to do more. And do you know what? It's not always nice if you're having a conversation with somebody or a journey of some description, and they know a bit about you, and they're giving you the information that you require before you have to ask six questions to get one piece of information. So I think it's just common sense, really, in many regards, isn't it?
It is. It's a very obvious thing, is that we've all been on conversation where we've been handed to here, handed to there. We've repeated the same information. Clearly, this gets rid of all of that. You're right. I mean,
Yeah,
the directives now that have just been published and out there, where AI has to be proven the way it works, the way it engages. There's a lot of new uh, new rights and bits and pieces out there we've got to make sure the clients adhere to. And you're right, having the vulnerability flagged early, what it is. What I think the biggest piece is here is not trying to second guess. We said this already. It isn't like these big language models. It's not making it. It's focused specifically on these conversations,
yeah,
which means you can control what it does. It may be certain vulnerabilities. You don't at that point let the AI take over. You say, when this one comes in, straight to an agent, give them the summary of the history, and it goes to an agent that's trained in that specific area. Very easy
yeah,
to do the routing and everything else in there as well. So yeah, I mean, it's having it under control, Mark, I think, is the key part. So I think
yeah.
there's another whole podcast in that, because I know timing
Oh,
wise these
oh
are
my God!
fairly
When you
short.
get into now, we're probably not the best to talk about it, but there is a lot of regulation around ethical AI, explainable AI, and there is going to be more happening as as every year progresses, because there is a concern about, like, especially around the generative AI. You mentioned Chat GPT. That's just one of many. I use Perplexity as well as ChatGPT. Both are excellent. Both are good. There's a brand new one out, DeepSeek, the Chinese one, that seems to be causing a lot of
Yeah,
waves.
here's a lot of press right now. Yeah,
Um, but the one thing I would say there is that one of the things that we mentioned um, on the really in 2025 would be, definitely, you mentioned the conversation summaries. The other one that I think is going to have a big impact is the co-pilot, where rather than the agent having to think about what response or what templated response do I go back, that the system now will be picking A and B, two
yeah.
options for the agent to go back.
These are your best
Uh,
best routes forward. Yep,
Absolutely,
yep.
based on outcomes that have happened previously. And again, that will be a personalized response back to the person. Now, they could agree with everything that's in front of them and they press send, or they could modify it. So I think definitely with the conversational summaries, where even if the agent is a new agent coming into the conversation a half a day later, it's really going to help that. But that co-pilot as well, I think the two of them together are really going to, because again, I look at them, and it's not just a Webio thing, that you see other technology companies that they're talking about between 40 and 70% agent efficiency gain from conversational summaries and co-pilots. So again, we're not seeing anything different. So other technology companies from voice and those type of things, and they're doing similar things and they're clever as well. So there's a general consensus that they're the two that are going to sort of really have that impact in 2025. So
Yeah,
it'll be
I don't
interesting to
disagree with
see
that.
how.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I don't disagree with that at all, Mark. We talk about sentiment analysis at the beginning, NLP, and the sort of technical side of it. That's what that's delivering, isn't it? So
Yeah.
it's there now to do that properly. So yeah, completely agree.
One takeaway that, and we did say that we'd have some takeaways and what have you. Um, the idea of, and people do get sometimes the whole AI, the capability of AI gets excited and let's jump in at the deep end and what have you. The one thing I would say is build it up layer by layer. Let's not, and don't try to
Mhm.
get that level of complexity that you want to have, 72 interdependent little bits hanging together. You may want to get there, but our proven experience over the past couple of years is definitely build your complexity layer by layer, bed it in, get your base level on your metrics, add something extra. You will get to be very complex quite quickly, but jumping in at the deep end, we've seen it, we've sort of advised against it, and sometimes the customers say, no, this is what we want to do. But all, as I say,
Yeah,
sharing what we've
it's
seen, what works and what doesn't work. You've seen that a
it's
hundred times, Graham.
it's how technology has changed, isn't it? Really, that's allowed that because it used to be you have to swallow the ocean because I've got to put an ERP system in or a system in, and I have to know
Yeah,
everything it's going to have to do because it all interdepends on this and that and the other.
yeah,
The world's changed. Software's changed. You can do something, test it, try it, tweak it, throw it away, use half of it, whatever you need to do, and that's really easy to do. So you're right. It definitely, yeah, don't swallow the ocean. Definitely is the way to go forward.
yeah,
Concentrate. Where's the biggest issue? Try it, tweak it, learn from it, and improve it. Improve it. And I think one of the key stats there again is that we talk to our agents and we look at what the agents are doing, and then we try and automate a lot of that. Usually within the first 3 months, 50% of what the agents were doing is now automated. That's within 3 months, 50%. So you can
wow,
see very quickly with those little tweaks and changes,
yeah.
it's very simple to start to push that down. As you say, then those stats come up to 85% at the moment. I think that will grow much slower, as you already said, because that curve sort of does have to taper off. You're never going to get the 100%.
The,
But yeah,
the
it's
law of
it's
diminishing returns, I think, is the technical term.
that is the one, Mark. That is the one.
Yeah,
Cool.
but superb. Listen, that is us done for this particular episode of the Credit Shift podcast. Graham, thank you. I know that
Thank
you're
you.
joining me on the next one. And the next one that we will be doing shortly is all about choosing the right AI for debt collections. We sort of given you a little bit of a flavor during today, but we're going to dive into a bit of a deeper dive into what's the difference between a custom language model like what we would have at Webio or the large language models that we hear about from ChatGPT, the Perplexity. Oh, there's so many of them there now. But it would be a case of where that's where we're looking forward to having a chat about that. So again, thank you for everybody's time, and we'll see you on our next podcast, the Credit Shift podcast.
Absolutely. Pleasure. Thank you.